Step into any convenience store and you will find yourself participating in one of modern capitalism's most successful scams. You are paying premium prices for a bag of pressurized gas. Technically, it is nitrogen used to keep the contents from turning into stale mush. But psychologically, it is a brilliant exercise in selling vacuum sealed disappointment. Once you bypass the gas, you are left with a handful of hyper engineered, shattered starch discs. They are so fragile they practically disintegrate if you look at them too hard. If you calculate the price per pound, you are paying luxury steak prices for a humble tuber that spent its life covered in dirt. It is a financial masterclass in packaging nothingness. Yet, we buy them by the billions. Not because we lack financial literacy, though that helps, but because these salty shards have successfully hijacked our evolutionary brain chemistry. Our ancestors spent millennia roaming the savannah, desperately craving salt, fat, and carbohydrates to survive. Today, corporate food scientists have weaponized that ancient survival instinct against us. They engineered the perfect texture, a phenomenon known as vanishing caloric density. The chip melts in your mouth so fast, your brain forgets you just ate it. Since your brain thinks no calories were consumed, it never sends the signal that you are full. You just keep reaching back into the foil bag, searching for a satisfaction that is physically impossible to achieve. Even the sound is weaponized. Sound engineers have discovered that the louder the crunch, the fresher our brains perceive the food to be, regardless of how long it sat in a warehouse. So we happily sit there, deafening ourselves with acoustic marketing, munching on ancient dehydrated starch while convinced we are eating a fresh harvest. It is a beautifully orchestrated illusion, a multi-billion-dollar empire built entirely on selling us salted air, evolutionary traps, and existential regret. But the funniest part of this global culinary conspiracy is how it started. It was not born in a sterile laboratory or a corporate boardroom. It was born in 1853 out of pure, unadulterated, petty human spite. A chef got so incredibly angry at a customer that he decided to ruin their dinner. He wanted to create something so utterly inedible that it would teach the patron a lesson. Instead, he accidentally created the world's favorite snack. Welcome to Saratoga Springs, New York, in the year 1853. It was a picturesque resort town where the 19th century ultra-wealthy gathered to drink mineral water and pretend they had personalities. At the center of this high society playground was Moon's Lake House, a restaurant catering to people who had far more money than taste buds. Enter our antagonist, a patron so cartoonishly wealthy and entitled that his entire existence was a walking tax-the-rich metaphor. He ordered a plate of French fried potatoes, which at the time was a trendy, sophisticated delicacy eaten with a fork. Naturally, he expected perfection, but when the plate arrived, the patron scoffed. He complained they were too thick, too soggy, and lacked the dignified crunch of high society. He sent them back to the kitchen, demanding the chef show some respect for his refined, delicate palate. The man running the kitchen that night was George Crumb, a chef of mixed Native American and African American heritage who had exactly zero patience for wealthy entitlement. Crumb calmly prepared a second batch, slicing them slightly thinner and frying them up. He was trying to be professional, which was his first mistake. The patron sent them back again. He claimed they were still far too thick and soggy, as if Crumb had personally insulted his ancestors. It was at this precise moment that something snapped inside Chef Crumb. The delicate boundary of customer service dissolved, revealing a deep reservoir of pure, unadulterated spite. Crumb decided he was no longer in the business of cooking dinner. He was now in the business of psychological warfare. He grabbed his sharpest knife and sliced the potatoes so thin you could practically read a newspaper through them. They were paper thin, fragile, and utterly ridiculous. He wanted to parch the man's throat. His goal was to make these potatoes completely impossible to eat with a fork, violating all rules of dining etiquette. He threw them into a vat of boiling oil, frying them far past the point of culinary decency, until they were hard, shriveled, and brittle. To finish his masterpiece of malice, Crumb smothered them in a mountain of salt. It was a lethal dose of sodium meant as a direct edible middle finger. The waiter carried the plate back out to the dining room, likely preparing to duck for cover when the screaming started. Crumb watched from behind the kitchen door, waiting for the sweet satisfaction of a rich man choking on his own arrogance. The patron stared at the plate of brown salty shards. With no other option, he abandoned his fork and picked one up with his bare fingers. He took a bite. A loud, sharp crunch echoed through the silent dining room. Crumb waited for the outrage, but instead, the patron's eyes lit up with a terrifying, ecstatic joy. He loved them. In fact, he loved them so much he demanded another plate and then another, completely ruining Crumb's carefully constructed act of hostility. The spite chip had failed to ruin the patron's night, but it succeeded in changing the world forever. Crumb had accidentally weaponized deliciousness. To understand how a chef's boiling rage became a snack food empire, we have to look past the kitchen and into the dark, dusty corridors of 19th century German philosophy. Enter Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who possessed both a spectacular mustache and an equally spectacular disdain for human comfort. Nietzsche coined a term for Crumb's exact psychological state: ressentiment. It is the deep, toxic stew of frustration that brews when you are completely powerless to change your situation. When you cannot physically smite your oppressor, your brain does something fascinating. It redirects that bottled up hostility into a creative, albeit deeply passive-aggressive, masterpiece. It is the ultimate coping mechanism of the weak. If you can't beat them, make them choke on your compliance. George Crumb was trapped in the ultimate cage of powerlessness, the service industry. He could not throw the wealthy Cornelius Vanderbilt out of his restaurant. So, he operated under what Nietzsche would call slave morality. He redefined the rules of engagement to turn his submission into a weapon. This suggests a highly unsettling truth about human progress. Some of our greatest breakthroughs do not come from a desire to help humanity, but from a desperate need to annoy someone. Noble ambition is highly overrated. It is far too polite to actually get things done. Take, for example, the invention of the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell didn't just want to connect the world, he wanted to stop his deaf mother and wife from being isolated while simultaneously ruining the telegraph monopoly. Or consider the double-entry bookkeeping system, invented by a friar because he simply did not trust merchants to tell the truth. Spite is the high-octane fuel of human ingenuity. It is the silent partner in every major patent office. The psychological anatomy of a spite invention is remarkably consistent. First comes a spark of absolute blinding irritation. Next is a sobering realization that physical violence will result in jail time. Finally, there is sublimation. The anger is cooled, condensed, and poured into a product designed to prove your enemy is an absolute idiot. The potato chip is the purest physical monument to this exact process. It is a crispy, salted manifestation of a chef's silent scream. It was a literal screw you served on a delicate porcelain plate. And the absolute best part, the customer didn't just accept the insult, he paid for it. Every time we open a bag of chips today, we are participating in a century-old ritual of shared pettiness. We are consuming a product that tasted good only because it was seasoned with genuine, unadulterated malice. Nietzsche would have absolutely loved it. It is the ultimate triumph of the weak over the strong, achieved through the medium of deep frying. Crumb didn't just feed a difficult patron. He proved that human civilization is propelled forward not by our loftiest dreams, but by our most childish desires to say, "I told you so." But personal spite is famously difficult to scale. To turn a local tavern grudge into a global industry, we first had to industrialize the anger. Enter the food scientists. These are people with advanced degrees who dedicated their lives to optimizing the exact decibel level of a potato snapping. It turns out, your brain associates a louder crunch with freshness even if the chip itself was packaged during the Clinton administration. So, laboratories spent millions engineering the perfect acoustic profile, turning a simple snack into a precision-guided auditory weapon. If that sounds like a lot of effort for a slice of tuber, wait until you meet the corporate lawyers. In the mid-20th century, Procter & Gamble decided to solve the problem of broken chips by creating a perfectly uniform, stackable saddle shape. But this triumph of geometry ran into a rather expensive obstacle: the British tax authority. Under UK law, potato chips, or crisps, were subject to a 15% value-added tax. Ordinary food, however, was exempt. To save millions of dollars, Procter & Gamble's legal team had to argue something truly remarkable. They stood before a judge and argued, with entirely straight faces, that Pringles were not actually potato chips. They pointed out that Pringles are made from a slurry of rice, wheat, corn, and dehydrated potato flakes, pressed into shape. The lawyers literally argued that Pringles did not contain enough potato-ness to qualify as a potato product. For a brief, glorious moment, a high court judge agreed, legally declaring Pringles to be more akin to a cake or a biscuit. The victory was short-lived, as an appeals court later ruled that if it looks like a chip and tastes like a chip, the government is going to tax it like a chip. but the sheer audacity of the argument remains a monument to the lengths we will go to protect our salty margins. Today, this global infrastructure of spite produces and distributes over 6 million tons of chips every single year. That is 6 million tons of processed, fried, and packaged resentment consumed by humans sitting on their couches. George Crumb's petty revenge has been fully democratized. When you open a bag today, you aren't just eating a snack, you are participating in a multi-generational chain reaction of irritation. From a difficult customer in 1853 to an angry chef to a multi-billion-dollar boardroom optimizing the crunch to extract your last dollar. It is a beautifully closed loop of human frustration. So the next time you pay too much for a bag of mostly air, don't get mad. Just remember, anger is the most delicious ingredient we have. Enter Albert Camus, the French philosopher who spent his life arguing that human existence is fundamentally absurd. He would have loved the potato chip. Camus famously told us to imagine Sisyphus happy as he pushes his giant boulder up the hill, only to watch it roll back down for eternity. It is the ultimate loop of meaningless effort. But Sisyphus had it easy. At least he did not have to pay $4 for a bag of air to get his boulder. We, on the other hand, willingly participate in a much sillier cycle. We buy the bag, we consume the grease, we feel the brief chemical rush, and then we stare at our oily fingers in silent shame, only to do it again next Friday. This entire multi-billion-dollar ritual exists because a chef in 1853 had a colossal, beautiful temper tantrum. It is the gold standard of accidental success. George Crumb did not set out to revolutionize the snack industry, nor did he care about culinary history. He just wanted to make one incredibly annoying customer suffer. And yet, every time you crunch into a barbecue-flavored chip, you are actively celebrating his ancient, petty vengeance. You are eating history's most successful middle finger. It makes you realize that our grandest systems are not built by visionaries with 5-year plans. They are built by tired people who have simply had enough. Modern business schools teach strategy, optimization, and synergy. They completely ignore the raw nuclear power of pure, unadulterated spite. So, let this be a comfort to you in your daily, agonizingly mundane struggles. That petty email you sent this morning, it could be the foundation of a global empire. Your passive-aggressive sigh in the break room might just be the spark that transforms human civilization. Do not let anyone tell you your anger is useless. We live in a world that tells us to let things go, to find peace, and to breathe through the frustration. But peace never invented a crispy, salty snack. It was the anger that did it. The beautiful, salty, vindictive anger. It is the fuel that keeps the absurd machinery of humanity spinning. So open a fresh bag, embrace the grease, and imagine Sisyphus happy, greasy, and completely, beautifully vindicated.